the first in a series of videos where I plan on breaking down the interview with Roadside Nick. I'm using the extended cut that was released by Adventures with Purpose a few months after their initial video was released. So, because it is quite a lengthy video just on its own, without any commentary, I've found it necessary to break it up into smaller portions. So this is part 1. You'll notice I've turned it into a split screen video so that while you're listening, you can observe two separate things. I've zoomed in on Nick's face so you can pay more attention to facial expressions, but at the same time I've put the original video up in the corner so that you can also look at body language. There's been plenty of discussions about Roadside Nick, but by breaking it down section by section, I think this should allow us to take a closer look at what he said and how he presented his information, and perhaps for us to reassess our opinion of the legitimacy of his claim. For those of you who are not hugely familiar with my channel, you will hear a little bit of background snoring. That's just part and parcel when it comes to my channel. A lot of my editing occurs when it's nap time for the dogs. So right now, my Chihuahua is snuggled up under her blanket and snoring like crazy. So you will have the occasional snoring noise occurring in the background.
So we just got out of Best Buy after picking up some supplies here in Reno, Nevada. We're on our way to work the Kylie Rodney case just down the street in Truckee, California. And Nick, a longtime supporter, fan of ours, appreciate you for coming up to us, possibly has some information in regards to the Kylie Rodney case. So why don't you explain a little bit about what you may have run into?
So this is probably a good place to stop first and consider the concept of the money shot. And of course, the whole notion of creating a marketable video. The reason I'm mentioning this here is because according to the interview that Nick did with Squirrel Girl, and if anyone has a copy of that, it would be great to be able to watch it again. But one of the things that stuck in mind with me was Nick telling Squirrel Girl that he actually wasn't a long-term supporter of Adventures with Purpose. He wasn't a huge fan of Adventures with Purpose. So straight out of the gate here, we've got the audience being somewhat manipulated in a way that's intended to push the video and make it more appealing. If this guy is a supporter of Adventures with Purpose, it makes it sound better that he's approached them randomly outside a shop to give his experience around Kylie's case. Does this detract from the credibility of the interview? Does it detract from Nick's credibility? Possibly, but to me it seems like a classic marketing tool. Bear in mind that Adventures with Purpose is essentially a business run by Jared Lysak. This is something that has been very well packaged to the point where he now has over 3 million subscribers. Part of the packaging is in making videos as appealing as possible, not just through outstanding videography, but through creating the best narrative. You need to tell a good story to keep listeners engaged. And that's something that this channel does do quite well. But it is important to keep this in mind because it is a reminder that this whole video is put together in a way that is intended to manipulate its audience. That's what you do when it comes to cinematography. I'm not saying that it's a negative thing. I'm just saying that it is a technique, and it is one that has been well employed by Adventures with Purpose.
So my name is Nick. I work at an emergency roadside assistance program. I got a call up in Truckee, Boca, for a battery call. So pretty much that means that the vehicle can't start.
Let's just acknowledge first of all the odd language here that he's used. He said that he works at Emergency Roadside Assistance Program. If it's a program, wouldn't you say you work for that program? It's just curious use of language. Perhaps it is about local syntax. And in terms of referring to it as Emergency Roadside Assistance Program, is that normal? If someone from the United States or someone from that area could let me know, I'm very curious about that, because to me, I would have expected him to say something more along the lines of, I work for or with AAA roadside assistance, or I do roadside assistance. It was a strange way of saying it, but like I said, it could just be local syntax, and it may be that me as an Australian is listening to something that is perfectly normal for that region and simply thinking it sounds odd because it's not the way that it would be said here in Australia. Now, we do know that prior to this interview that they did have a conversation, first of all. So it is possible that the way that he is discussing the situation could in some way have been almost coached by team members from Adventures with Purpose. Because to me, saying I got a call for a battery call, which means that a vehicle wouldn't start, it's a bit of an oxymoron to me. If it's a battery call, then logically the vehicle wouldn't start. So is this him breaking it down for dummies? If so, was this by request of Doug or someone on the Adventures with Purpose team? Or is this just his way of explaining things? But then again, is it his way of establishing a narrative? It's curious. Could just be that he is someone who is very good with explanations and likes to break them right down to the nitty-gritty. Let's not beat around the bush here. He is, to some, appealing. He's kind of easy on the eye, which means that in a situation where he's working on a vehicle, he's probably quite personable. So he probably gets questions from female drivers who are quite comfortable with asking him questions which may, to other people, sound like dumb questions. So perhaps in his line of work as a roadside assistance guy, he's become accustomed to really breaking things down to explain things to people. I know from my own personal experience of talking to mechanics regarding car maintenance or repairs, that as a female, unless you establish pretty quickly that you actually do know a little bit about mechanics, then they will try and break it right down to the nitty-gritty, presuming that you need it broken down into little teeny tiny bits so that you can properly understand. So it's possible that this is just the way that he speaks normally when he's out on a job.
So I went en route up there, found the vehicle. At the time, I didn't realize that this was a situation until later on, but...
Yeah, so let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
You said you went to Boca.
Yes, sir.
So over near Boca Lake?
Yes, sir.
So not Prosser Lake, Prosser Creek Lake.
It's right by Crosser Creek.
Yeah, so just north. So you went to Boca.
I remember that the first time I heard this, I was surprised that he said that this occurred at Boca. But of course, now that we've had plenty of time to do research, we know that there were multiple witnesses who said that they saw Kylie and or her vehicle at Boca. There was also early reports where Marika Beck claimed that the teens had apparently left Prosser and gone to an after party. Could there have been an after party at Boca? Interestingly, when you look at the map, which will be in a later video, but the map that Nick shows of where he attended the vehicle is towards the area which, if you have a look on Google Maps, you can see was a popular area for doing donuts. But as far as sightings, we have a witness who claims to have seen a vehicle matching Kylie's shortly before the time when Nick attended the vehicle in the exact location. We have another account of a SUV stuck in the mud at the boat ramp at Boca early that morning, and other accounts of people saying that they saw the vehicle or Kylie. One particular witness who came forward stated that they actually knew Kylie and that they had seen her. So when we look back on it, there's absolutely no surprises really over claims that he serviced the vehicle at Boca. Also, Doug admits that he had heard intelligence which pointed them in the direction of Boca. This wasn't the first instance that he had heard any information which would point the search in the direction of Boca. Now, I'm no expert on body language, but I did note that throughout this interview, his body language remained fairly open in that he didn't have his arms crossed. He was turned directly at Doug and Nick Rinn, and he was also giving eye contact. I am curious, however, as to whether or not he was given direction before the interview in terms of not waving his hands about too much. Because if you watch him throughout this whole interview, he holds his hands in front of him, clenched, but then he will periodically let go, and you'll see him using some hand movements and gestures in his explanation, but not really raising them up. I just found this to be curious, although I will point out that he does seem to be quite comfortable and confident in front of the camera. He is standing there with two people facing him directly while he provides his narrative, as well as at least one team member standing on the sidelines videoing the whole discussion. He's able to give a clear and concise explanation. There's certainly none of that word salad that you get from the Truckee local, and the narrative is sequential. So these are things that definitely work in his advantage. But of course, at the same time, there are some people who just are natural public speakers and can gain people's confidence quite easily. Sometimes it just comes down to being a good salesman as opposed to believing in what it is you are actually selling.
Yes, sir.
And you said you responded to a vehicle, and you in hindsight realized it may have been this vehicle. What kind of vehicle was it that you responded to?
It was a gray, like a lightish gray Honda 4-door sedan.
Okay, all right.
Or SUV, I'm sorry.
SUV?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
This definitely gave me pause for two reasons. First of all, when you work with vehicles, are you really likely to get confused between SUV and sedan? They're two very, very different things. But before we get to that, he describes it as being grey. Now, I don't know how call-outs work in America, but in Australia, if you call the RACV, the roadside assistance, then you are going to be giving the registration of your vehicle, the model of your vehicle, and the colour of your vehicle. Now, the vehicle in question has been described by everybody else as silver. You would expect that in the roadside call it would have been described as a silver vehicle. Given that he attended the vehicle, you would imagine that the things that are sticking in his mind at the point of time that he's doing this interview is the details that he was given when he attended the vehicle at Boca, being that it was a silver SUV, and of course the details that he would have seen on the poster. Like I said, if you are someone who works with vehicles on a daily basis, to me it seems very odd to not be referring to things using the correct descriptions. It was a silver SUV, and more specifically, it was a silver CRV, Honda CRV. Wouldn't you expect someone who is that familiar with vehicles to be straight out visualizing the vehicle in their head and therefore referring to it as specifically the type of vehicle that it is? At the very least, I would have expected someone who is actually working in the industry to refer to it as a particular model of vehicle, not just a grey sedan, SUV. If you are seeing the vehicle in your head, even if you couldn't remember that it was a CRV, surely if you spent that much time working with vehicles, straight up you would refer to it as a silver Honda. I could be totally wrong on this. Please comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are with regards to the description of it as a grey sedan, SUV, as opposed to describing it as a silver Honda or a silver CRV.
And go ahead and describe.
So when I first go there, I usually do tests on the vehicle to see what's going on. At first, when I went there, I realized after my test that everything was working great on the vehicle. Come to find out later, once I approached the vehicle and went inside, that the vehicle was in neutral. At the time, I thought that was kind of awkward that you can find out or realize that something like that could have been the case for why the vehicle wasn't starting.
So first up, I'm not quite sure of why he smirked at that point. Yes, it is kind of amusing that the only reason the vehicle wasn't starting was because it was caught between gears. But if you work in roadside assistance, it's something that you would see quite regularly. that kind of thing when vehicles don't start for a really simple reason. And generally, is it something that you're going to smirk about, or is it just another day at the office? Now here's where things start to throw up a few red flags for me. He talks about how when he first gets there, he runs tests on the vehicle and that it seems to be working fine, and then when he approaches the vehicle, he discovers that it's stuck in gear. Now that's a curious way of going about things. My experience, and this is coming from someone who had many old clunky vehicles over the years, when you call Roadside Assist, they're not going to start pulling out testing equipment to find out what's going wrong with your vehicle before they actually hop in and try to start it themselves. Most of the mechanics I know will be able to turn the key and immediately tell you what's going on. They'll listen for a tick that may tell you that, yeah, the battery's dead as. Or if it goes click, 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 that's the starter motor that's gone. So the first thing you're going to do is turn the key to assess why the vehicle's not starting. And of course, if you're going to turn the key to find out why the vehicle's not starting, you're going to go through the usual process that you would go through to start a vehicle. In other words, you are going to perhaps put the vehicle in park, put your foot on the brake, whatever is necessary for that particular model of vehicle. If you are someone who's doing roadside assist, surely the first thing that you are going to just automatically do before you start the vehicle is put your foot on the brake, grab the gear lever, check that it's in park, and then turn the key. So why did he have to run all these tests first before discovering that it was stuck between gears? Right from the very beginning, that was something that definitely had me questioning if he was being 100% on the level.
So I simply put it into park, started up the vehicle, everything was fine. At that point in time, I did notice that the female, which is Kylie, I realized after, she was very hesitant and very skeptical on everything that was going on. She was asking me really weird questions, like in the sense of, how do you put on your seatbelt correctly, and and she asked me to show her on how to connect it to her actual belt. That in my eyes, that was very awkward. I deal with things that are kind of awkward, so I was like, all right, it's just another day on the job.
So here is the first of a number of things that he describes as being odd or not quite right. He's essentially saying here that a teenage girl was basically inviting physical contact. He's saying that her behaviour was slightly odd and that it felt a little awkward, her basically asking him to show her how to use a seatbelt. To me, it seems more than just awkward. But at the same time, let's bear in mind that sometimes when you look at things in retrospect, you notice more things that you hadn't initially noticed. So perhaps at the time, he was more focused on the vehicle and hadn't added up all the odd behaviours. Perhaps he had discussed it with his girlfriend after the fact, or perhaps after seeing the poster that was saying that Kylie was missing, that he then spent more time thinking it over and started noting in his head all the odd things that occurred. So we can't necessarily straight out say that this is completely wrong, but it certainly seems odd. I will say that to me it also was interesting that he immediately referred to the girl as Kylie. And yet he's talking about an encounter which occurred a week prior to him apparently becoming aware of the fact that Kylie was missing. So is he really certain that the individual that he spoke to was Kylie? Because if I had seen someone, even in a one-on-one situation like that, a week prior, and then saw a poster where perhaps I recognised the vehicle and the girl looked similar, would I be confident that it was exactly the same girl, or would I be presuming that it was the same girl because I recognised the vehicle and therefore the girl must be the same girl? I would kind of expect someone who is retelling a situation such as this to be referring to the girl as opposed to referring to Kylie. Although I would like to hear what other people's thoughts are on this. So it feels like I've barely even started looking at this interview, but we're already nearly up to half an hour. So I think I'll pause there and then put more out in the next video. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already done so, please press like. Helps me get out there into the algorithm. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated, and it would help me to continue to grow my channel. Stay tuned. There's plenty more to come.